Hello, viewers, and welcome to my channel, Jackson's Journal. My name is Matthew Jackson, and I'm continuing my series on the Bible and slavery, and this will be part 4. Before I begin, let me first remind you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I do encourage comments. I leave the comment section of my videos on, so it enables my viewers to be able to respond, whether you agree or disagree. You're free to respond. If you disagree, all I ask in return is that you be polite and cordial. Okay, and another thing, I'd like to plug my other YouTube channel called CCM Drummer. I am a drummer and I feature the CCM classics. So if you like to see me to feature songs in the CCM classics, feel free to go visit my channel, CCM Drummer. Okay, let me continue our series. This is part 4. Now let me do a quick recap. In part 1, here are the scriptures that I talked about in part 1. Now, here are the scriptures I talked about in part 2. Then we have our scriptures in part 3 that I discussed. Now, I'm going to start with part 4. So you can see the Bible has a lot to say about slavery, a lot. And so you can't just knock this all out in just one video. That's why it's an ongoing series. But let me pick it up at Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 10 through 14. It reads as follows. Verse 10, when you go to war against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman and are attached or attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Verse 12, bring her to your home and make her shave her head and trim her nails. Verse 13, and put aside the clothes she was wearing when captured. After she has lived in your house and mourned her father and mother for a full month, then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. Verse 14, if you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. End of passage. Now, this was not uncommon back in ancient times when one nation warred against another nation. The losing nations, the citizens of the losing nations, oftentimes were captured, and if they weren't killed, they were made slaves. This has happened all, even the Native Americans, the Indians in America did the same thing. This is done all over the world. This is a common practice. It wasn't just a Hebrew thing. All right. Now, having said that, I think this is a pretty generous provision the Lord had made for the Israelites. Hey, if you take a captive and make her your wife and it doesn't work out and you're not pleased with her, you can't take advantage of her and keep her as a slave or sell her as a slave. You've got to let her go free, let her go wherever she wants. I think that's a pretty good deal. I don't think the Babylonians or the Syrians or Assyrians or Egyptians or the Edomites, whoever the other societies in the Middle East at that time, I don't think they were that generous with their captive women if they were to become wives. Okay, so I think that's a pretty. Now, the shaving of the head, trimming of the nails, I'm sure there's some exegetical reason. If I was to really do an exegesis and do some background into the culture, I do know this, that a woman's hair was her pride. Okay, women took pride in their hair. They got a lot of self-esteem, and that was a part of their beauty, is having nice hair. And having to shave your head and lose all the hair that you grew, I'm sure there's a significant reason, and also for trimming the nails. But even after a month, you shave your head, you mourn for a month. Well, after a month's time, your hair's still going to be pretty short and not going to be all that attractive. But hey, if the Israelite who captured this woman, if he thinks she's still attractive after a month worth of growth on her head and wants her as a wife, then hey, more power to him. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. Now let's move on to Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 15 and 16. If a slave has taken refuge with you, do not hand him over to his master. Let him live among you wherever he likes and in whatever town he chooses. Do not oppress him. Interesting. I think that is a very anti-slavery verse of the Bible. In fact, I should have shared that verse in part 1 with the other anti-slavery verses. And I don't hear the people who complain about the Bible endorsing slavery, I don't hear them complaining about this verse. So that's pretty straightforward. Do not oppress a fleeing slave that's taking a refuge among you. Now let's move on. The next verse can be found in Judges chapter 9, verse 18. Gideon's son Abimelech, I don't know how to pronounce his name, was born from a slave/concubine and became king of the city of Shechem at the behest of its citizens. Now, this verse does show that even though your mother is a slave or a concubine, it does not ultimately dictate your destiny. Okay, you can still rise above your circumstances. Now, there's one thing of note that I want to make clear here, and it depends on which translation of the Bible you're reading. Some translations of the Bible will identify a woman as being a slave. Others will identify the woman as being a concubine. But that doesn't mean that being a slave and a concubine is the same thing, even though you may see the two words being used interchangeably. It is possible to be a concubine and not a slave. And then there's situations where a woman is a slave and then she becomes a concubine, but is still a slave. So usually it's the non-Israelite women who are still slaves and concubines, where an Israelite woman could be a concubine but not a slave. So yeah, there's that distinction. And we learned that from Sarah, because she had a slave named Hagar, and Hagar bore Ishmael from Abraham. Sarah told Abraham, well, take Hagar, my slave, and make her your concubine, and then, she can produce an heir. And same thing with Rachel. Rachel had a slave named Bilhah. And so Bilhah bore Jacob two sons, Dan and Naphtali. Leah had a slave woman or handmaiden of sorts called Zilpah, and Zilpah gave Jacob Gad and Asher. So again, those situations were pre-law. Those are just things that happened in history, just like Joseph being sold by his brothers into slavery. I'm not really dwelling on those passages of scriptures in this series because there are no policy statements governing slavery, regulating slavery. That's the kind of passages that I'm concentrating on in this series that I'm doing. But anyway, okay, so I digressed a little bit. Let me move on. Here's a very interesting story. This can be found in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 36 through 46. Now, basically, I want to give you a summary of this passage. I don't want to read every verse in it, but basically, the gist of it was King Solomon told a man named Shimei Shimei to build himself a house in Jerusalem and to never leave the city. So he was kind of like under house arrest, if you will. 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves escaped to Gath. So Shimei went after his slaves, and Solomon had him executed for leaving Jerusalem. So even though, I think Shimei could have went to Solomon and said, Your Highness, I know you restricted me to Jerusalem, but 2 of my slaves escaped. Can I go after and retrieve them, and then I'll come back to Jerusalem? I think he asked Solomon before he just took it upon himself to leave Jerusalem. I think maybe, I don't know, Solomon could have been a hard nose and said, no, sorry, get somebody else to go get your slaves. You're staying in Jerusalem. For whatever reason, Solomon had him executed because he defied the order. He left Jerusalem. So even though he left the Jerusalem over slaves, so that's kind of sort of anti-slavery there. It was good for the slaves. You don't hear the slaves complaining about him getting executed. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 1. The wife of a man from the company of prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he served the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as slaves. Okay. This is kind of interesting. I don't know how biblical it was. I don't know if God had made any regulations in the Mosaic codes, but basically here the creditor was going to hold the 2 boys' father accountable. In other words, the 2 boys, the debts of the father, he was going to hold the 2 boys accountable and make them pay off the debt. Now, when he says they're going to take my 2 boys as slaves, that probably would have been a 6-year contract. And on the 7th year, become free. But even so, the boys did not incur the debt. Their father did. Okay. Long story short, if you read into the chapter 4 of 2 Kings, you'll notice this is where Elisha told the widow, okay, go get some jars. Go get all the jars that you can find. And then she had a little bit of oil, and from that little bit of oil, she filled up all the jars and that she could find with oil. And she used that oil to sell so she could pay off her debts. Now, this is a very interesting passage in Scripture because it promotes free enterprise, free market, because the lady had to do her part. She had to go find, first of all, she had to go find a bunch of empty jars to fill up with oil. Then after she had all this oil, she had to go out and market herself, say, hey, got some oil, I'll make you a good deal on some oil. And she sold the oil. So that's an amazing story. So that's it for 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 1. Let me move on. Let's see how much time we've got left. Got 2 more verses. Let me go ahead and I tell you what, I'm going to stop right here. I got 2 more verses that are taken in the New Testament, but I'm going to, since they both cover the same kind of theme, I'd rather just lump it up and make it part 5. And part 5 will be my last video on this series. So this video series will be a 5-part series, and we'll wrap it all up. In the next video, we'll talk about Titus 2, verse 9 and 10, talk about 1 Peter 2, 18 through 20. So, thank you for watching. And again, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, and God bless.